This week on CrunchWeek, we're going to be talking about Nokia's new phone, Dropbox's developer conference, and Hulu's failure to find a buyer. Hi, welcome to CrunchWeek. I'm Anthony Ha.
I'm Billy Gallagher.
And I'm Greg Komperek.
So there's actually a bunch of different things we're going to be talking about, and I guess maybe the best place to start is with the big news about Nokia's new phone. Greg, what's new?
So they do have a new phone. It was announced earlier this week. It's called the Nokia Lumia 1020, I think it's called. And it's kind of following up in this series of phones that they've had lately, where the main focus is just this crazy high-resolution camera. So the 1020, it runs on Windows Phone 8, which is Microsoft's latest OS. But the big thing about this phone is that it's 41 megapixels, or the camera on the back is 41 megapixels, which is just unheard of for camera phones.
Right. So, I mean, is it something that you think a regular consumer would buy, or is it more really going for this kind of like a more kind of high-end, like photography-focused audience?
That's the thing. I don't know.
Right.
I feel like most consumers are really, really happy with the camera phone that they already have. The camera phone enhances like the HTC One or the newest iPhone. Crazy good already, and those are shooting at between like 8 and say 14 megapixels. Most people don't really have a need for things that are 30, 40 megapixels. And then even if they do need it, a 40 megapixel camera phone is never going to shoot as good as like a 30 or 40 megapixel big old DSLR.
Right.
So on that hand, even the prosumers wouldn't really want it, because they're probably happy with their iPhones or their Android handsets, and then if they need to shoot like a wedding or something, they'll just switch to their DSLR.
Right.
So I don't know who this is really for. It's still really, really cool because there's things like one of the advantages is that you can take a picture and then zoom into it later and still make it look, it doesn't look like you zoomed into the picture. It just looks like you shot it at that zoom naturally, but it's because it's such a high resolution.
Right, because I mean it sort of gets to like that actually if you just take a regular picture at that resolution, like the distinction between, at that level, like between different levels of megapixels is like almost hard to detect with a normal eye.
Yeah, one of the weird things about it, something I actually learned kind of long after the announcement, is that it's not shooting pictures at 41 megapixels.
Okay.
It's shooting them at, I think, like 35 or 36 megapixels, but then it's shooting a secondary picture, which is like 5 or 6 megapixels. So it's always shooting two pictures at once, so that once you go to send a picture, you just automatically have that lower resolution one, so you're not sending 15, 20 megabyte files constantly.
Right.
But one thing I'm kind of curious about is, that's a lot of storage space. I think there's maybe 16 gigs of storage space on this phone, and like my iPhone, which is shooting at a much smaller resolution, already fills up way fast with pictures and videos that I shoot. I can't imagine that you're not going to have to be backing up constantly from this phone.
Right, because I mean, I guess that also gets to kind of the different use cases people have, like for their camera, in the sense that I'm somebody who like goes in and like I just delete photos like pretty quickly, just because like I don't like to have them pile up. But I think most people, like, they've got these crazy giant photo albums now on their phones, and like you said, like it could be like, with this level of resolution, it can be hard to actually store all those photos on the phone.
Yeah.
So I know that John Biggs also wrote a post about he was not entirely impressed with the news this week. What did you think of that post?
So his main thing is that he's calling it theatrics. He's saying that like this phone really doesn't have anything to offer except for this absurd megapixel lens, which is to some degree true. But at the same time, Nokia realized that they are in a tough spot. They didn't really have anything to offer a couple years ago. So they said, you know what, we're going to be the guys that go just full force into Windows Phone. And they've stuck with it. And there's not, at this point, a lot of smartphones are all pretty similar. In terms of specs.
Right.
Like, most high-end Android phones are all pretty similar. The iPhone has been the same for quite a while. So it's hard to really stand out. So to find anything that makes you stand out, it's hard to say that's a gimmick when it's the one thing that'll make you different from the rest.
Right. I guess we'll see what happens with that. Moving on to, I think, another piece of news this week was Dropbox held its developer conference. DBX, I think I got that right.
DBX.
DBX. Which is, I mean, in the grand tradition of conferences like F8, just kind of unpronounceable and strange. but they, made a couple of announcements. One was the fact that they've reached 175 million users, which is up from 100 million just basically in November of last year. So it's pretty fast growth. And they also announced that they're expanding their platform and adding some features which essentially make it possible for app developers to use Dropbox as a tool for app development, basically to sort of sync up their apps and sort of store app data, as opposed to just a consumer using it to store our documents. But actually now, like it becomes sort of the back end for the apps to kind of live in the cloud as well. And I mean, I thought it was it was just interesting that Dropbox had a developer conference, because I think a lot of us don't necessarily think of Dropbox that way, but in fact I think they've had a platform and integrations with a lot of different companies for a while now, and I think this is a way to sort of just signal, hey, like we are a platform company, but also to sort of make these announcements. Billy, are you a Dropbox user yourself?
Yeah. I was interested to see it. I thought it was interesting for me to see, at least being a college student, seeing Mailbox absolutely blow up on campus all spring, and then move over to Dropbox. And it seems like Dropbox users had always sort of been around and been a lot of latent users, is what I see, with people share one or two big files at once, but it's not like Google Docs, at least the people I know that use it the way I use it, where you're constantly sharing. But it seems like it's growing well, and people are using it more and more now.
Right. And so, Billy, we've also kind of got you on the campus beat here for TechCrunch, and so I think one of the things that allows you to do is you talk to a lot of these startups maybe at a slightly earlier point than some of us do. Have you talked to anyone who's actually starting to think about Dropbox more as kind of like a platform that they could kind of tap into?
Yeah, it's definitely being seen, again, sort of along that same way of use cases. The way I think a lot of people on college campuses think of their ideas is, what are people doing right now on campus? What's not being done on campus right now? And it feels like as people are using Dropbox more and more as a day-to-day thing versus I one time have this giant file I'm going to send you.
Right.
At the same time, all these smart CS kids are saying, well, okay, now how can I tap into this and what can I build that sort of ties in?
Right. And Greg, so I know one of the things we were talking about before we actually came on camera was also, there are actually some developer tools out there that can do some of the same capabilities as what Dropbox was announced before. I guess a lot of people are sort of hacking together something for themselves, right?
Yeah. I mean, third parties have always kind of seen Dropbox as this thing that they could back up their apps files to. But there was never really this official solution. But a lot of note-taking apps, a lot of reminder apps, to-do apps, photo apps, they've all been used. 1Password is a really popular one.
Right.
They've always kind of just hacked their way or just made use of the API in ways that would work. But it was always kind of tacked on. So for Dropbox to embrace this is really just a natural step.
Right. And it seems like, the more, we've kind of talked about it and thought about it. I mean, at first, to be honest, when I was at the conference, I was like, oh, this kind of seems kind of arcane and like not necessarily interesting to that many people. First of all, clearly I was wrong because some of our coverage from the conference did pretty well. But I think it is also a way, like I said, of saying like, look, Dropbox isn't just sort of this consumer tool anymore, but we really want to be sort of this cloud backend for, all kinds of things, including, basically sort of the app ecosystem.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Dropbox isn't charging developers for this, right?
That's correct.
So if a developer wants to integrate Dropbox syncing into their app, it costs them nothing.
Yeah, that is my understanding, and actually that was one of the things that one of the analysts at the conference brought up a couple times, because I think he kind of didn't believe it, and Drew basically said, no, like, there's a possibility that in the Drew Houston, the CEO of Dropbox, said, there's always a possibility that we'll have some sort of premium developer feature, but our business plan does not revolve around actually, making money from developers. We see developers as a way to expand the ecosystem. Yeah,
that's really, really smart of them to do, because when you're developing an app, especially something that needs file syncing, one of the biggest annoyances is figuring out how you're going to back up these files. Do you use Amazon S3 or something like that? And that's expensive because that's going to cost you money for every user that gets on the service. So you've got to charge more than each user, whatever it costs you. So for them to offer that for free is going to get tons of developers on board, which will in turn be a really good user acquisition strategy, because as soon as you open this app, it's going to be like, hey, do you have Dropbox? You can back up with Dropbox. Just tap this to sign up.
Right. So yeah, I mean, hopefully, like those guys, and hopefully this is sort of the next step towards Dropbox becoming just, a huge deal.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, they already are, but.
See, Dropbox only makes money if you're storing a bunch of files on the service, because you need, more file space. So by getting more apps on board, you're inherently using more space, which means you're more likely to sign up.
Right.
And you see it as more useful because you're using it across a multitude of apps.
Oh, right. I hadn't even thought about that. That regular users are themselves going to become bigger users.
It makes Dropbox kind of ubiquitous. So it's super smart. It's crazy smart.
Right. So I think the last thing we wanted to talk about was Hulu, which some news that broke recently about Hulu, which is that they basically failed to find a buyer again. Billy, do you want to tell us just like what the basics of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the never-ending saga here. I mean, as far back as I think early 2011, mid-2011, we were hearing reports that they had been solicited with offers to buy them out. Hulu, obviously, a ton of content for online video, very popular with Hulu Plus for $8 a month, competing with Netflix and Amazon. And it's just been, the 2011 rumors died down and they didn't sell, and now it's been about a few months now where it's just rumor after rumor. They're going to DirecTV, they're going here, they're going there. Private equity buying them out, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
DirecTV did seem to be the front runner,
Right.
and now obviously Hulu today announcing they're not going to sell. I think the biggest loss is for DirecTV. I was excited to see sort of what they could possibly do with the platform. When you look at some of their content like NFL Sunday Ticket, which they offer solely through the computer, I think they're doing really interesting things, getting away from the cable box, getting untethered from that cable subscription and taking advantage of that market. So I was excited to see what they do. But now I'll be excited to see what they do with Hulu still. I mean, they've got some challenges, but...
Right. Yeah, I mean, it seems like one of those weird situations. I mean, the challenge for Hulu, I think, has always been that, it's owned by all these different media companies who like sort of have these competing interests, and it's trying to like, deliver what they need, but at the same time, stand on its own as an entity. And I think that, I guess potentially if it was acquired by someone like DirecTV, things become a little bit clearer, although then it is sort of serving kind of one master maybe in a way that it wasn't in the past, and maybe that sort of changes its direction a little.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to me to see if they crack down on sharing of Hulu Plus accounts more, because I think up until this point they're like, someone's going to buy us, whatever, people can share their accounts. I haven't really seen anybody get nailed or have their account shut down for sharing their password or anything like that.
Right, although it's hard to, I think that, and it's the same with like Netflix, right, that like
HBO goes amazing with that.
Yeah, that there's always going to be a certain level of sharing you can't crack down entirely, because because then you're basically cracking down on at least one person who's a paying customer.
Oh yeah.
But you don't want it to get too out of control.
Yeah.
But you actually also had a business suggestion for Hulu in terms of where you think Hulu can go from here, right, Greg? Mark? This is going to save Hulu.
It's not going to save Hulu. The thing I'm curious about, something I've considered about writing for a while, is I'm sure it's really sticky licensing, but it works out for both the content creators and for Hulu for every single show, even if you offer nothing else, and offer the pilot. Every single TV show on Hulu, you should offer the pilot. Because as it is right now, say if a show is in its 5th season, you'll probably click in, and unless it offers the entire show, you might get just that series, or just that season, or like the last 6 episodes, which for people who have never seen the show, it's worthless.
Right.
Like if I want to watch, what's a show that's on Hulu? Arrow, right? If I want to watch Arrow, and I can only watch the last...
Do you, though? Keep going.
I keep trying. I keep trying to get into it, but I can't. Anyway, if only the last 4 episodes are available, I don't want to start a show mid-season. So I feel like if content creators were willing to put every first episode, to use that terrible phrase, the first hit's free. Like get people into TV shows, and then even if you only offer the first one and then be like, hey, you should buy the box set, or you should buy this on iTunes, even if you don't offer the rest of the content, make every single show on that useful to people that have never seen that show.
Right.
And you can link on that same page of you like this pilot. We don't have the whole series, but here's a Hulu series, or here's something we do offer, behind our Hulu Plus wall. That's similar to it.
Right. It's either lead generation for Hulu or for this show, which maybe Hulu can monetize in other ways.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to see. I mean, there were reports today that they're going to invest more in Hulu Plus and sort of emphasize that more. But I think content's a huge issue for them. You look at Netflix invests billions of dollars in their content. Amazon's investing more and more, and it's just the money's not necessarily there yet. I mean, it's just $750 million that they committed again to it today, but that's just still not as much as the annual investments that Netflix and others are making.
Right. Do you guys subscribe to Hulu Plus?
I'm on Hulu Plus.
You are? Okay.
Yeah, I am.
All right. I use my roommates, so maybe I shouldn't admit that publicly. Although I'm not in love with it, but I guess if you're if you're a real TV addict, it's the price is low enough that it's.
I share mine with our brother.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't pay for cable TV, and it has enough of the shows that I watch that makes it worthwhile.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Doesn't have Sharknado though.
Sadly.
Yet.
Yeah. One day, Sharknado.
Well, you heard it here. This, here's a business plan for you guys at Hulu.
Pilots and Sharknado.
Pilots and Sharknado. Good luck with that, and thanks for joining us on CrunchWeek. We will see you next week.